Hej wereld. Hej world. Välkommen allesammans till min kanal. Welcome everyone to my channel. Jag heter Zack the Demon Lord. I am Zack the Demon Lord. And welcome to this YouTube video, as stated. My last video was not very great. It was about Portuguese. I don't know what else to say. I just had a loss of words in describing, but hopefully this video will be better, as I am a little bit more experienced with the topic at hand. So, let's dive in. So today, runes. That is what we'll be talking about, is runes. We'll try to keep this as short and simple as I can. What are runes? How are they used? Stuff like that. So, runes in their simplest form are essentially letters. Kind of like how we're speaking English, we use the Roman alphabet in modern day English, as is just very common across all Western European languages. We use the Roman alphabet. In the Eastern European languages, there's quite a few that use the Cyrillic alphabet, like Russian and Ukrainian. Greek, they use the Greek letters. Arabs use the Arab letters, or Arabic letters, whatever you want to call them. There's many writing systems in the world, and runes are one of them. They are an ancient writing system, and quite frankly, modernly a dead writing system. No one uses runes for the most part. They're still in use, just not to, most people that use runes are going to be very exclusive. They're going to have a reason, whether it be religion or they're part of a small community that wants to preserve history and so forth. So yeah, let's dive in more. What are runes? Essentially, runes are, in a simple sense, the writing system of mainly the Germanic peoples. So basically, Northern Europe, or to simplify it that way. Other groups use runes to some extent. The Slavs use the runes to some extent. Some Celtic group letterings can be considered runes, but the most famous are going to be the Germanic ones. And so from there, we can talk about the uses. So there is the very simple basics that I talked about as letters. Letters are used to spell things, and there is a rune for each sound. And so, use the, kind of like with English. English isn't a great example, but bear with me, because English just is preposterous with our use of the Roman alphabet. We give one letter 6 pronunciations, which is not very efficient, mind you, but anyways, language ran aside. I made a video about that. You take a letter, you give it a pronunciation equivocation. The letter that looks like this is pronounced G. The letter that looks like this is pronounced Y. The letter that looks like this is pronounced Z. That's how letters work. You equivocate a sound with a symbol. I think we're all familiar with this concept. We use it every day. But then there's the second use. And the second use is especially popular with certain runes. Certain runes get a knack for this. And that is for the elements of magic. Bear with me. To explain, we do this with the Roman alphabet as well. Just not with letters in specific, but more so with past languages. A key example of this is the Latin language. When we think of Latin, especially under a modern lens, we could think, the Bible, the Catholic Church, stuff like that. But under that lens of Catholicism and Christianity in general, we can also think of stuff like evoking the blessings of God, or summoning a demon. You know, Latin can be looked at as a very holy, prestigious, beautiful language, and it can also be looked at as a witchcraft sort of language as well. And there is proof that there were some Christian witches out there. As much as of an oxymoron as that sound, there are people that would believe that their faith in Jesus Christ and, you know, the Virgin Mary could evoke magics. There are those that, you know, would use the Latin language in this sort of way of evoking certain things to happen. And so we can look at Latin under a magical lens, and the same thing can happen with the runes. The one that especially gets looked at with a magic lens is the first one I'll mention, and I do have my handy phone now, so I can mention all the runes I can, and that is the Elder Futhark runes, which I'm the most familiar with. So what are the Elder Futhark runes? And so they are some of the older runes. They were in use during the Proto-Germanic era, and so at this time there's a language called Proto-Germanic that would have used these Elder Futhark runes, and so you can kind of think of it as like, I guess the Latin to the Romance languages, or the Old Chinese to modern day Mandarin and Cantonese or something. I don't know. It's the base. It is the origin of all the other languages. We start with one language that then groups off into modern day languages. Anyways, it's kind of like the base, and so that's why it's often used as a magic sort of thing. So Elder Futhark is the writing system for the Proto-Germanic language, which basically originally, you know, the whole north part of Europe, you know, Germany, Denmark, Sweden, Norway, the Netherlands, Belgium, maybe even parts of Poland, and Austria and stuff like that would have spoken the same language, because originally that area was just a bunch of Germanic tribes, and that's why it's split off into different languages over time, is that we, you know, being tribal peoples, you've got all these people separated from areas that have claims to certain areas of land, and so over time things split off. But it's this unanimous, very old roots that get to serve as the magics. Kind of like how Latin, it connected all of the Christian world, yet each, you know, area had its own unique language, and so it's kind of like the same concept. It's the old roots that so gets treated as a magic thing. So yeah, it would have been spoken by the Proto-Germanic people, and yeah. Next up, we get two forms of the younger Futhark runes, which, for easier context, were the runes that the Vikings used. And these ones will mainly be used in spelling purposes only. And these are the ones that initially Norse heathens and people into Vikings will be interested in, but they also get turned off. Here is why. There are two versions. There's a long branch and the short twig. I don't know too much about different, you know, scripts, but I want to say that both these versions of younger Futhark are really just about kind of like how in the Roman alphabet we have, you know, we have print script and then we have cursive script, and so it's like two just forms of writing. One if you're trying to be elegant, one if you're just trying to jot stuff down real quick. I want to say it's something similar to that, but who knows? I'm not, an expert at the runes, but I'm just trying to give a simple video on the runes. So these were the letters of the Vikings, essentially. So the people of Denmark, Sweden, and Norway would use these to some extent. I will mention, since these two are the ones I know the most, the Younger Futhark and the Elder Futhark, I know Elder Futhark better. There is a detriment to using the Younger Futhark, and that is that it seems like letters can double dip. The sound for a K and a G can use the same letter. The sound, letter for an S and Z can be the same. T and D can be the same. And so, sort of these letters that are in similar pronunciation groups get grouped with the same letter. I have seen, for example, with my Grimfrost shirts, that they'll add a little mark to specify this isn't a K, but a G. But I digress. I don't know, if that's like an actual thing with the Younger Futhark, but at least when I've dabbled with this keyboard app that lets you write out in runes, that's what it says, that there's only one letter for a K and G. It's the same thing. Versus with the Elder Futhark, when you're using the Elder Futhark, each letter properly has displayed an actual one letter. And so I like the Elder Futhark better for that reason. But going down through the list now, we have the Anglo-Saxon runes. So the Anglo-Saxon runes would be the runes used by the Anglo-Saxons, aka the English/British people that lived on the British Isles. The runes used by them. Then we have the medieval runes, which in this case, and it does tell me with some of these, where medieval, when it says medieval, just means North Germanic, which I'm assuming would just be like the Dutch and German peoples, maybe even some Polish would have used these in their languages. Then we have the Armanen runes. I have no clue what those are, but they exist. And I'm going to mention them because they exist according to this. If I find any information, I'll probably include it, but who knows. Then, and that's what it says for the Germanic runes. Moving on, it has magic runes group, which, again, some of the other runes can be used for magic, but moving on. The first in the magic groups is they are the Seax Wicca runes. Don't have any clue what those are. Maybe they're used by the Wiccans. Who knows? But they exist. And if I find any information, we'll include it up here. Next in the magic group is the Theban, something along those lines runes. Again, like Seax Wicca. Don't know what they are. So we'll include any information up here. Next up, and this is something I know, we get the Pictish runes. And it says in parentheses swirly. I don't know if there's different versions of Pictish, but I can tell you that the Picts were a people in basically what is modern day Scotland. And so they would have been runes used by them, the early Scots. Anyways, next up, there's a fantasy group grouping. So I'm assuming these runes are totally made up for some fantasy book that will be out there. I'll find more information put up here, but they're called the Seirth runes, and in parentheses, Angerthas Erebor, whatever that means. It's a thing apparently, maybe in some book or something. We'll see up here. Then we get an area on this that says historical alphabets. So first up, we have Gothic. So there's Gothic runes, which Gothic, I'm going to assume, refers to either the Goths, which are some of the settlers of especially eastern Sweden. There's also, obviously we know Gothic art, which happens in Germany. So maybe something along those lines of Swedish or German people. We'll find more information and put it up there. Next set is called the Ogham runes, which is Old Irish apparently. And so there's a writing script for the Old Irish people. There are Old Turkic runes, which does not surprise me. So these would be runes used by the early Turks. Which, the reason why it doesn't surprise me is there is a large theory that the people of the Germanic world, whether it's Germany, the Netherlands, Scandinavia, all that, there's a theory of the Turkish migration where basically some Turks decided, let's go north, and travel north until they reached Northern Europe and settled there. So basically the theory is the Germanic people originate from the Turks. Again, it's a theory. It's fairly believable, but you know, we can't go back in the past necessarily. At least in current day and age, we can't go back in the past, so we don't know until we know. But yeah, moving on. Next we have and I probably might butcher this. We got the Rovasiras runes, which say they are Hungarian runes. It kind of makes sense. Going north and north, they would have to travel through Eastern Europe in order to get to Northwestern Europe, so it makes sense. We have the Old Italic runes, or Etruscan runes, as it says. So this, and it does say the Etruscan runes, and so it might not make too sense for them to have runes necessarily, but also kind of does, because information just kind of spreads and people learn stuff and then base new stuff off of old stuff. But the Etruscans were a specific people on the Italian peninsula. One thing to keep in mind is when we say stuff like Old Irish, Old Turkic, Old blah, Old blip, it doesn't mean that everyone in the modern day country borders aren't the same borders from back in the day. There are different peoples and different groups. So the Etruscans were one specific group from the modern day Italian peninsula. Something to keep in mind, but I digress. And the last sort of thing that I have on here is the Glagolitic roots, which says Church Slavonic. So what this, I'm assuming, is runes that were used in a church context for maybe the Slavic people. And so the Slavic people meaning like the Poles, the Russians, the Ukrainians, which would make sense. Ukraine especially has quite a few ties with the Viking world, so it would make some sense for them to have runes of their own. But yeah, I digress. So essentially, to wrap things up, runes are a writing system. No matter which runes we're talking about, they're essentially a writing system. A lot of them look very similar. Some of them are specialized, obviously. Not every language is the same. And so you'll have runes for, as mentioned, there's going to be runes for the Proto-Germanic, runes for the Norse language, runes for the Old English language, for the Old Irish, Old Turkish, Old this, Old that. They all had their own lettering system, their own runes. And so the rune count is going to be different for each language. And whether or not there's the magic practice with that runes is going to be very specific to the runes we're talking about in specific. I can especially talk about the most popular, which are their Elder and Younger Futhark runes, which are going to be Germanic, obviously, in nature, but especially with the Younger, very Scandinavian in nature. The Elder can be used for both. I use it personally mainly for spelling. Not that I really write stuff out in it, but that's how I would use them. But you can use them for magic purposes. And where it's going to be a little different is you carve a letter, you know, a rune on a stone or on a piece of wood or on something, and then you can use it as like a magic thing. Modern day practice, there are people that will have a bag of Elder Futhark runes carved on like stones or wood or stuff, and they just do magic practices with it, and they'll pick out 2 or 3 out of a bag, and that's supposed to be their fortune for the day. That's their magic for the day or whatever. Some people carve runes onto slabs of wood or stone and stuff to evoke magic in a certain area. But yeah. So basically, runes can be used in a writing sense and in a magic sense, but there is also a last sense which can get a little bit magic, but I use it more in a modern day thinking of an artistic sense. And that is that you can kind of merge the runes together to form stuff to mean something else. For example, if I wanted, I could, you know, I don't know the names of the runes, so I'll just use the Roman letter equivalents. I could mix the Z rune, the A rune, and the K rune to make my name Zach and write it as one single letter. I can also just write them straight down as a line, or which is more common than a cross, I think. But yeah, that is one unique thing, is you can do artistic stuff with the runes versus with, I want to say artistic, I mean like merging him into one single line or merging him into one character. You could do stuff like that that you can't do with the Roman alphabet or the Cyrillic alphabet. You can't write, I mean, you can attempt it, but you couldn't write a Z, A, and K all together because the Roman alphabet isn't designed that way. It's not designed to be used that way. You know, the runes are very, it's like a grid. Like, they had a perfect box idea in mind and considered, you know, your ups, your downs, and your diagonals and all that. It's very mathematical in that way, and so you can create unique symbols that might be unique to yourself. You can do all this artistic stuff, and so the runes are very interesting. I would suggest looking into them more yourself. I probably didn't do a absolutely fantastic, perfect job of talking on them, but I at least gave you some beginner information. There's different kinds of runes. You can research what you want. I am into the Elder Futhark and Younger Futhark runes because I'm a Norse heathen. I don't use them for magic purposes. I just use them for writing purposes. I'm not my religion for magic purposes, but I'm more for the mythology. I'm more into the gods than I am to the idea of magic. For whatever the case is, I digress. That was a video about runes. If you enjoyed, give a like, subscribe, and share it with your friends and family that might be interested in this information. We'll see you in the next video, and until then, hey-do.